Welcome, everyone. My name is Shondine Jones. I am the Communications Manager for Flower Hill Institute, and today I'll be the moderators for today's presentation. Thank you for joining us today for the Local Meat Capacity Grant Applicant webinar for the Local MCap grant. We're going to go over some general overview about the Local MCap program, as well as some eligibility, ineligibility, scoring criteria, and some additional tips and resources available to all USDA grant applicants, including the USDA Meat and Poultry Processing Capacity Technical Assistance Program. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted on the Flower Hill Institute webinars page, as well as the Flower Hill Institute webinars webpage. At the end of today's presentation, we will be conducting a Q&A session, so please hold all questions until the end of today's Local MCap segment and post them in the chat feature below to ensure that your questions are included at the end of today's presentation. Without further ado, joining us here today, we have Dr. Robert Maddock, MPTA Technical Assistance Officer from American Meat Science Association, and as well as Mr. Dave Carter, the Technical Assistance Provider Director from Flower Hill Institute. So, Dave?
Sure. Thank you, Shondine. And I'm having trouble getting my video started, so I don't know if that's on your end or not, but always like to make eye contact with folks. And so, first of all, on behalf of all of the team at Flower Hill Institute, we're really pleased with the turnout that for this webinar. I think there's a lot of interest in the countryside on the information that we're going to be sharing this afternoon. And as Shondine said, we want to make sure that at the end, there's plenty of time for questions and answers. So in addition to Rob and myself, we're really pleased today to have with us Sarah Hernandez. Sarah is the Meat and Poultry Processing Technical Assistance Program Coordinator for the Agricultural Marketing Service. And Sarah has been a great person, has been working with us. She's waving to everybody here right now. So she will be also available during the question and answer to weigh in and help you with those questions that you have. So with that, I am going to start sharing my screen if all works well. And hope everybody can see it here. Get my slideshow. All right. So what we want to do this afternoon is focus on the grant opportunities that have been made available for meat and poultry processors. But first of all, just a little bit of background for folks that are on the webinar, how this all came about. And USDA for the last year and a half has made what I call a bold commitment of $1 billion to create a more resilient, diverse, and equitable meat and poultry processing system. And in doing this, they knew that this is not just about putting out grants for folks to develop, new buildings or facilities, that in order for this to really succeed, that they needed to have the ability to provide technical assistance all the way through the process so that we could really create some successful businesses. And so they've brought together a great network of organizations to provide technical assistance to folks, all the way from identifying grants that are available and that they may be eligible for, to going through submitting those grants, developing their business plans, floor plans, marketing plans, getting businesses up and running. And Flower Hill Institute has been brought on to provide the coordination role for that. And just as an overview, Flower Hill Institute is a nonprofit that's based on the Jemez Pueblo in New Mexico. It's an indigenous-led nonprofit that focuses in 4 areas: food and agriculture, climate resiliency, cultural preservation, and youth and education. And the technical assistance program has really been part of the food and agricultural outreach for Flower Hill. But the scope of work and what AMS has charged us to do is fourfold. First of all, is federal funding technical assistance, exactly what we're doing here this morning, helping people learn about grants and are they eligible, or is that grant applicable to them, and developing the right grant proposals. Secondly is ag business development. As I said on the previous slide, this isn't just about building buildings, it's about helping people develop successful businesses, whether it's a local business just in their local community, or if they're trying to develop a branded product or go into food service or institutional, whatever that business model may be. Third is the technical and operational support. If you're developing a new business, what is the appropriate floor plan? Are you looking for a brick and mortar, or a mobile, or a modular, or maybe even a glorified community kitchen to feed your community? And so we help you through that technical and operational. And then the fourth one, which is really critical, is supply chain development. And we're focusing a lot of attention on that area right now, because we know that a lot of folks get excited about the opportunities to, if you're a beef producer, that you've got a potential market for your New York strips and tenderloins and ribeyes and maybe ground beef, but you need to know what to do with those chucks and rounds, and particularly what can we do with the other half of the animal, the hides and leather, the offal, the pet food ingredients. So we're really trying to bring it all together for the folks that we're working with. And as I said, they brought together a great group of organizations to provide the technical assistance. The Niche Meat Processing Assistance Network is an extension-based organization affiliated with Oregon State University. A lot of people are familiar with Rebecca Thistlethwaite and the work that she's done through the years with small processors. The Intertribal Agricultural Council, which has technical assistance capabilities across the nation, particularly working with tribes and tribal producers. The American Association of Meat Processors, which, as they like to describe, they're the largest association of meat processors, but they don't represent the largest meat processors. They represent everybody else. The American Meat Science Association, where Rob Maddox hangs his hat, is really focused on helping to develop new uses and opportunities for meat, as well as the Agriculture Utilization Research Institute, which handles a lot of the exploration, research, development, and implementation on uses of all types of agricultural products. And then we're going to be having some additional organizations coming on as we move forward that will help us continue our outreach. And in addition to our formal network, we've developed partnerships via memorandums of understanding with more than a dozen organizations, ranging from Women in Ranching to the Farmer Veteran Coalition to the Rural Coalition and RAFI USA, the Farm Aid and others. So it's really a robust network that has been put together to reach out to producers, but also to provide that technical assistance. So before we get into MCAP specifically, I just want to review some of the things that have been out there and are out there. Is we've gone through 2 rounds of the Meat and Poultry Inspection Readiness Grant. These were grants that were provided to facilities to help them get ready to get a grant of federal inspection. Last year, there was the first round of the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Grant that's done through the Rural Development, USDA Rural Development. There has also been the Meat the Meat Processing Intermediary Lending Program, which are funds of up to $15 million that have gone out to a number of nonprofit lenders around the country to set up revolving funds to support new enterprises or expansion of existing enterprises. The NIFA part, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture for USDA, has put a lot of resources into workforce training. And then there's the Supply Chain Loan Guarantee Program that is currently ongoing. There's the Value Added Producer Grant, which is, gosh, the deadline is nigh. It's probably in another day or two. And then other grants that have been offered through this past year through AMS, the Farmers Market Promotion, and the Local Foods Promotion, and others. And we are anticipating the release of another round of the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program from Rural Development in the near future. And I anticipate that this next round of the MPAP grant will be a little bit different than the first round. I know we've been working with rural development to talk about some recommendations to make sure that it's more accessible to smaller and startup projects. So we're looking forward to that one. But the two grants that the Agricultural Marketing Service issued here just about 2 weeks ago are the Local Meat Capacity Grant, or what we call MCAP, and the Indigenous Animals Harvesting and Meat Processing Grant, or the IAG grant. And I'm just going to touch on the IAG grant because this is one that's very innovative, very unique. It's $50 million that they've allocated for tribal governments to put together projects that focus on traditional harvesting and indigenous animals and developing those projects to feed the tribes and local communities. So this is one that, again, as I said, it's unique. And if you are on this webinar and this grant may be applicable to you, we are going to do a similar webinar on Thursday, the same time, that focuses specifically on the IAG. But today we're going to focus specifically on MCAP. So the Agricultural Marketing Service has dedicated $75 million in overall funding to this program. And there's two buckets. First of all, there's the Project Expansion Grant, which are grants from $100,000 to $5 million that existing processors can use to bring on new equipment, to upgrade cooler capacity. They can hire folks to help them with their HACCP plan. There's a number of things that can be done. But the existing processors, to be eligible for this grant, you must either be USDA or state inspected or under what they call the Cooperative Interstate Program, or plan to be. And we'll talk about a little bit more of what plan to be means here in just a minute. Now, this grant does require a 50% match, but that match can include in kind. So the value of your labor and other factors can be utilized. That's all specified in the request for applications. But if you fall into the category of underserved producer, that match drops to 25%. And it's very helpful to look at the RFA and go in because there's some links in there that will take you. It's a little bit confusing because part of it talks about the National Resource Conservation Service definition of underserved producer, and some of it talks about the SBA. But if you're a limited resource producer, or if you are a veteran, you are an underserved producer. Women-owned businesses can qualify. It's a little more complex for women-owned businesses. That's where to go into the SBA program and take a look at that to make sure that you frame your application. But if you can do those, that drops you down to 25%. Now, here's the interesting thing under the Project Expansion Program is that up to 10% of this funding has been reserved for rendering projects. AMS realizes that byproduct utilizing that other half of the animal is very, very important. So in this grant, they put in funds to be able to either bring in rendering equipment or work with rendering companies that are in place to handle the byproduct utilization. Now, it's important to understand that rendering is a very strictly defined term and talks about reducing the proteins and fats to either a rendered fat or to what we call meals, chicken meal, byproduct meal, meat meal, and the others. It doesn't include some of the other uses. So take a look at that and make sure that you understand the use for that one. But let's just say that you're saying, to really improve my business and get me where I need right now, I just need a roll stock machine that might cost $120,000 and maybe a grinder that's going to cost $80,000. Well, you would fall into the area for the simplified equipment only grant. So you've got $190,000 of needs there. You just get the price on that based off of the price list or a quote from a manufacturer or other things that you can put in, and it's a fixed price grant. You put in for $190,000. If you're approved, you get approved to spend the $190,000. And this one doesn't require any match. So it's what AMS put together simply to help small processors bring on new equipment that can help them increase their capabilities and their capacity. So take a look at who is eligible. So the entities that are eligible are for-profit and nonprofit entities. So businesses, LLCs, cooperatives, and others. You take a look again, if you are like a business, you have to show that the applicant for the grant has got majority ownership, 51% ownership. So make sure that you address that. Tribes are also eligible as applicants, as are state and local governments and some of their subsidiaries through their, or some of their agencies. Now, to be eligible, you must process or plan to process under USDA inspection, state inspection, or cooperative interstate shipment program. You can also apply, or you're also eligible if you are inspected under the voluntary inspection program for things like bison, deer, elk, farmed elk, those type of things. The thing that is important too is, so what does it mean planning to process? Well, as you're putting together your application, that's where you can make it clear. I need this specific equipment because this is going to help me get my grant of inspection. So the way you word that can be very important. Now, folks or plants that have received the MPER grant last year, either through round 1 or round 2, are eligible for the MCAP grant, but you must have fulfilled the requirements of MPER before you submit your application for MCAP. And then if you go into the RFA, starting on page 6 there, it really talks about the type of projects that are eligible for funding. And this can really help you get your arms around, is this grant applicable for me? So if you need upgraded processing or manufacturing or labeling equipment, if you want to improve your cold storage capacity, maybe you want to just upgrade some of your retail space, or you want to hire some consultants to help you with some of your HACCP plan and your humane handling plan and the others. So this is a little sample of that list, but the RFA has got a more inclusive list of some sample projects that are eligible. Now, the ineligibility, you aren't eligible for this grant if you are a custom exempt facility with no plans to go under inspection. If you're just a local butcher shop and you have no intent to go under state or USDA inspection. If you're one of the big 4 companies, don't bother to apply. You're not eligible. And you must be domestic owned to be eligible. So foreign entities are not eligible. You cannot use this money for new construction or anything that increases your square footage. And this is important to note. AMS does not have the regulatory authority to really fund new construction projects. That authority really rests with rural development. And that's why the grant that we're anticipating on the MPEP from rural development will be focused largely in that area, we anticipate. This grant, though, is really to help you in your existing facility to do upgrades and improvements. Now, you also can't apply for anything that's funded through other grants. That would be double dipping. You also are ineligible if any costs that are incurred prior to the grant execution, and that's important, execution, not just the application, but the execution of the grant. So don't submit the grant and then go out and buy a bunch of equipment thinking, boy, I'm going to get this funded. And then any activities that will be reimbursed by a third party. So again, that sort of gets into the double dipping area. Make sure that you're really clean in how you put this together. And then I always like to say, when you apply for a grant, there's really 3 things to look at. First of all, what does the grant cover? Is this something that I really need for my business? And how much is the match? How can I come up with that match? Number 2, Am I eligible? So you go through that. Are you an eligible business? And then number 3 is, what's the scoring criteria? Every USDA grant has it laid out very clearly what that scoring criteria is. It's 100 points under the MCAP grant, the project expansion and the simplified both. But if you take a look, a quarter of the scoring on the project expansion is alignment intent. Is this going to fit in with local meat capacity? If you're applying for something because you want to do something on a big regional or a national scale, you're not going to score very well. This is about helping local communities and local capacity. And then if you take a look at those factors, technical merit, achievability, expertise, this grant does not require a feasibility study, but they definitely want to make sure it's feasible. And so all of those scoring areas are very important in helping those scorers determine, is this project feasible? And as you can see on the right side, it's a lot easier there. It's alignment and intent and market impact and opportunities. But this scoring area is so critical to focus on. So that's why I'm going to turn it over to Rob Maddox now. He's served as a scorer on these grants, and he's going to walk through that process with you.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Like Dave mentioned, my name is Rob Maddox. I'm with American Meat Science Association. And prior to serving in the role as a technical assistance officer, I was a professor at North Dakota State University for a long time. And so I've been on both sides, applied for a lot of grants and been on several grant panels. And I want to talk to you about so you've done all the hard work. You've gone through grants.gov, you've got all your unique IDs, you've got the format and your idea. How can you make sure that when your grant proposal gets to USDA, to the people making the decisions, how you can actually be successful with that? And so I spent a lot of time talking about that. And Dave, should I take over the screen, or is somebody
Stop sharing? Okay, go ahead. It's all yours.
Okay, I gotta make sure. Here I am. Okay, so here we are. That's me. So the grant review process is something I want to walk you through here pretty quick. So there's a certain way that these things are done, and it's similar or the same for all grants. As you've done all this hard work, you've got your work, you got your grant done, everything's done. The first thing that's happened, there's a first, I would say, top level review by USDA, and this makes sure that you submitted to the right place, that what you've asked for actually makes sense, that everything's completed, that all of the different forms have been filled out properly. If you messed up big time at this point, it could be rejected. There can be, and then some of these grants, there's a little bit of leeway there, but not a lot, because there's a lot of grants. On the first round of MPAP, for example, I forget how many hundreds of grants were submitted to work through. So you got to make sure that you're on top of things when you initially submit that, because you could actually just have kind of a top level rejection before anybody else has seen it. USDA, whether it's AMS or rural development or any of the other granting agencies, doesn't evaluate or rank your proposal at this time at all. What happens is they will identify what is called a project manager. That project manager, along with USDA, will identify panelists to evaluate your proposal with expertise. Okay, and in the first round of MPAP, and I'm sure for these, as we go through these additional ones, there was a lot of university meat scientists, there was some business industry experts and leaders in there, but people who really have the ability to evaluate your proposal in some detail. They're invited, and generally then those panelists will agree to review these proposals. And depending on how much time they take, this could, in the first round of MPAP, it was a very short, we just had a few days to evaluate proposals. But to just be assured that the panelists who actually do the evaluation do have quite a bit of expertise in the area. The way this works almost all the time is then each panelist has 3 proposals to review. One is the primary or first, then a secondary and tertiary reviewer. And so, for example, there could be a panel of 20 people is a pretty common size. Some of them are bigger, some are smaller. That panel, it depends on how many proposals have been in. So if there's 20 people, we'd expect there to be around 60 proposals or something like that. And so the first reviewer is assigned to completely understand your proposal. Okay, they're going to go through, they have to know the ins and out of it. They're going to read hopefully every word. They're not necessarily going to check to make sure that it's already gone through to make sure it's in the right spot. So they're going to start the review process, and they need to have a really good understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. And they're going to assign some scores as well. Then there's a secondary reviewer who also will read the entire proposal in some depth, make some notes, proposals, weaknesses, and then also will score this. Okay. And then there's a tertiary reviewer that will have read the proposal, but they may not have thought about it as much because they already had two other proposals they had to review. One is a primary or first reviewer, and one is a second reviewer. But they kind of a nice check and a third person to tell the first two reviewers, you missed something, or I agree, or it all makes sense here. So just want to point this out, is that really only 3 people are going to read your proposal, and only 2 in great depth. Okay, so that keep that in mind as you write these things, and it kind of makes sense too, because if 100 proposals came in, obviously no reviewer is going to have enough time to review that many proposals. Okay, so after we've got these proposals came in, we've got our 3 we've read as a reviewer. Then the panel convenes, and this is now all done online, or these projects are occasionally they'll bring review panels together at a central location, but now these are pretty much all done online. Okay, and we'll meet for several days, for several hours a day online, and they go through some order, and I don't know if it's order they came in, or if it's a randomized order, but they will go through, okay, here's the first proposal, and the first panelist will present the entire panel what your proposal is, along with its strengths, weaknesses, whether it's feasible. Typically, that panelist has 5 minutes, and they need to tell the entire panel, that could be whatever, a dozen, 20, 25 people, about your project. But they have 5 minutes to do this. The secondary panelists will then add, and they only have 3 minutes. And that secondary panelist will generally say, I agree, or I want to point these things out in addition to. And then the third panelist has just a little bit of time to fill in any gaps or make any additions. Okay. Then after those 8 or 9 minutes of discussing your proposal, the entire panel, most of whom have never seen your proposal, have time to discuss it. But due to the number of proposals we have to review, there is 12 minutes total to do this. So this happens very quickly. And then scores are assigned, and then kind of the panel can haggle a little bit on these, whether they think it's good or bad. But again, for most of those people, this is the first time they've actually seen your proposal, and they'll assign scores. During the panel process, then the first panelist, the primary reviewer, takes notes. Okay, and then there is a system in USDA, or actually the US government has a system that the first panelist uploads their notes, everything that was basically said, all of the strengths and weaknesses, into this review, into this system, and then they close it up, and then the second and third panelists get to add notes. So they'll jump in after the fact, and they can add or say, I agree with what we said, or I think there needs to be some, my notes said something a little bit more here. And they'll jump in. And once the third panelist has got, then all 3 of the people who read your proposal will then sign off on this, and then it's closed. And then we can't really add anything else. Okay. Then after we've gone through every proposal, how many there are that the panel has to review, the entire panel comes back together, and we're given the scores and the rankings of the entire, of all of the proposals, and puts a final ranking together. And this gets kind of tough. Again, literally only 3 people have read your proposal. Everybody else has just heard about it. And so I'll say this, and I'm going to say it again. You have to make sure that your primary panelist, your primary reviewer, which is assigned pretty much at random, is an advocate for your proposal. Okay. And then once all those rankings are done, we kick it over to USDA, whether it's Ag Marketing Service or Rural Development, and they ultimately make the final decisions on who's going to get funding. They have to draw some lines. They have to decide how much money there is. They'll do a more in-depth review of things like budgets and those sorts of things to make sure it's all appropriate. And they'll ultimately make the decision, but they're not going to deviate very much from that ranking that comes out of your review panel. So, like I said, you have 12 minutes. Your entire panel has 12 minutes to get this thing sold. And so your first reviewer has to be a champion, and you don't know who they are. If the first reviewer, your primary reviewer, does not like your proposal, you're probably not going to get funded. So how do you make sure that your reviewers become advocates for your project? That's kind of the key. And there are some really important things. Dave went through some of the scoring on especially the MCAPs here, and describe them just a little bit, but maybe I'll give you some tips, okay, for this as well. So it's alignment intent. Equipment expansion, limited facility upgrades. If you manage to sneak one through and said you have budgets where you want to add some square foot or do some things like that, the reviewers are pretty well versed in what the scoring intents are for each of these, so you're not going to score very well. So make sure you're aligned with that. Technical merit and achievability I put together. There's two things that these have to answer here. Are you proposing? Does it make sense? And then can you pull it off? A good example, we talk about a lot of people adding roll stock machines. You can improve product throughput. You can improve your graphics. Maybe there's more marketing potential. So I need this fairly expensive piece of equipment that I want you to cost share with. So there's some technical merit and achievability. If you don't have the space for it, or you can't prove that you do or say that you do, or you're not going to be making any more product, your throughput's going to be the same, that gets a little bit less, you're going to have less chance to score high points in those two areas if we don't think you can pull it off. Some other things, expertise, technical merit. Do you have the knowledge to be successful? And you don't have to have the knowledge. I mean, you could say, we're going to start doing this, we're going to add some equipment, we're not quite sure. You know, we'd like to add a smokehouse, but we're not 100% certain how we're going to make smoked or cooked product here, but we're going to acquire the knowledge, and we've got these people lined up to help us with these things. If you say that, or reviewers will say, yeah, they've got a plan, okay? That's a pretty big thing. As we go through some of these, then that fiscal plan, financial availability, if you do this, for a for-profit, obviously, this is pretty important. Is it going to improve your bottom line? Now, if you're working as a nonprofit or you're going to do something for a community, what you can't do is then, when you put these plans together, is lose money on it. We're going to increase our throughput, but it's going to result in us losing additional money as we go along. Therefore, we're going to have to constantly subsidize this plan. That's probably not going to be super viable. And I think your reviewers are going to score you very low in that, unless you can kind of show that by this, especially in MCAP, so you're going to do better. You're going to, make money or at least break even on these things. And then the resources, do you have access to everything you need to do this? Again, if you don't have access to the power or water, you should have if you're an existing facility, but sometimes those things take some space and time like that. A couple other things to think about is the market impact. Is there a market for what you're trying to do? Generally, yes, but if you're trying to, make a product that isn't differentiated, or you're in a saturated place where there isn't really a potential to sell a lot of your product, you may need to, that you're going to get scored less than something that's maybe a little more novel or a little higher quality. And then how can you price your products? If we can increase the throughput, but we're going to have to sell, jerky for $75 a stick or something like that, that's outrageous just to break even, probably isn't going to be, again, you're not going to get as many points on that. And then community impact and support. And I'm not sure if this specific grant is asked for letters of support, but even if they don't, I'm going to tell you from a reviewer standpoint, you can sneak them into the narrative. That's a good thing. Whether it is, a local development council, could be a tribe if you're that. It could be, a local business district sort of thing, business development, local ranchers, consumers. Get support, and you can sell that into them as well. And that's going to help with scoring that community support deals. Just a couple more of tips and hints and tricks that I've seen as a reviewer that helps. And I hate to say it, but format matters. If you do something that's not in the standard format, It may get rejected, it may not, but it's not going to score as well. So if you have these templates that come from USDA and they say, you know, bullet point 1 is supposed to be this and bullet point 2 is supposed to be that, make sure to follow that as well as you can. If you kind of deviate, you get off, again, you may not get rejected, but if the reviewer has to really hunt around into your project to try and find all the appropriate information to compare it to everybody else's, you're going to score fewer points. Again, Dave already mentioned, you must meet the intent. That's if you don't meet the intent, and I've been on a few review panels where you read the proposal, says, I don't think this really is what the grant was asking for. And even though it got past USDA or the initial cut, it really doesn't make sense for the funding that they're seeking. Again, that's a pretty big problem. A couple things there. You have to be able to find information, okay? Use white space, use bolds, use bullet points, right? Use the exclamation points. Make sure that you're writing with good grammar, proper punctuation. You could have a great idea, but if your proposal is poorly written or not proofread, it's just human nature that it's going to be less, they're going to think less of your proposal because it doesn't read well. Now, you don't have to be a great writer, but it's a good idea to take some time, get your proposals written, make sure it's in the right format, and then have somebody else who doesn't know about it read it. And they can maybe find some lacks or some deficiencies in logic. They can say, I really can't, or it's really crowded. You need to spread the things out. Not a lot of page limits on these. There are page limits for some sections and maybe word limits, but you use them up. But again, white space and bold and punctuation is important. Put the important things at top. Sell your project right at the beginning. We are going to do this. And you have there's a executive summary or a project summary. That's the very first thing people typically read. And you set it right up top. We're going to use the dollars we're going to get to accomplish this, and this is why it's important. And that can go a long way to getting your proposal to have a high rank. Okay, so make sure important things are easy to find. They're at the top. You sell your project immediately. The other thing about some people don't like to write redundantly, but it's fine. You know, if you say we're going to do this and it's going to result in that, and later on in the feasibility or not feasibility, the financial aspects of this, say, here's why we're going to do this and here's why it's important, here's how we're going to make money. You can say the same things over and over again to really drive home that primary idea you have. Some additional considerations, just about done here. When I've been on panels, the highest rated proposals have a plan to succeed. They, right at top, say how they are going to use the funds they're going to receive to be successful. There's nothing vague about their ideas. We've got this idea that if we can buy this piece of equipment, we can increase our market and we might make a little more money. You need to be more definitive than that, okay? Have a plan. We're going to do this. We know that we have the market. We know that if we install a piece of equipment, update our whatever we're using, increase our capacity, hire a consultant, like Dave mentioned, to help us with our efficiencies. We're going to succeed. We're going to make more dollars. We're going to improve the bottom line. We're going to make this business more feasible and financially stable going forward. Okay. Just like it's pretty obvious, know the request for applications, reread and read that RFA again. Read that request, know what it is. When you're writing your proposal, have that request printed out and next to you so you can refer back to it. Already just hitting this again, reviewers are human. Bad format, misspelled words, poor grammar. It doesn't matter if your idea is great. If you're not presenting it in a good way or doing a really good job with your overall, the way you're writing it, that's probably going to cost you actually in the end. So it doesn't take long to have somebody read your proposal, especially those important parts like the narrative. If you get deep into the weeds, they may not have to check your financials, for example, if they don't understand it, but they can surely look for those things that have holes in them. And so again, have someone not familiar with the project proofread it, whether it's your next door neighbor or somebody from the business community you respect, or a friend or a neighbor or university people. If you have an extension person, could be a county agent, could be something like that. Make sure they get to read that. And I think we got this. We're going to go back around with these resources, but this is me. pretty easy to find, or if you guys go through this and just go to Flower Hill, and they'll tell you about that here in a little bit. Okay. So I am going to stop sharing again.
Okay, I will start sharing again. And while I get set up, just somebody noted in the chat, and they're correct. I had mentioned that if you have an MPERG, that you needed to have it wrapped up by the time of application. It's actually by the time of award. So, okay, let's see if so we just want to wrap up and talk about the resources that are available to you as you look at this and prepare your grant application. First of all, it's important to note that for both the MCAP and the IAG, the deadline is 11:58 p.m. Eastern Time, or 11:59 Eastern Time on July 19th. And I always say, don't wait until 11:58 to submit. In fact, if you have not at this point started to get your SAMS number and your unique identifier and get set up in grants.gov, as Rob mentioned, do that now. Sometimes that process can take several days. And if you run into problems with it, we have some cheat sheets we can send you, but we also have some folks on our team that can help guide you through that. So there's more information. If you go to usda.gov/meat, they have all these grants listed. You go to the open grants, you click on that, it'll drop down. Both of these grants, as well as some other ones, are listed there. And then the additional resources. The Technical Assistance Network that I mentioned at the outset is available at no cost. This is not something where we're going to work with you and all of a sudden an invoice is going to show up. USDA has brought us on board to help folks work through this process, all the way from finding the grants to getting their businesses stood up. AMS has set up a help desk specifically to this grant, Local MCap at usda.gov. Sometimes if you submit something, it may take a little bit to get the answer back because they want to go through and make sure that they're giving you the best answer possible. And we will provide you with information as well if you reach out to Flower Hill or to any of our folks in our network. And then we also have a toolkit on the Flower Hill website. It has an overview of all of the grants and loans that are available right now, as well as some other things that can help you prepare your application. And then we just ask you stay connected to receive more information on this and other opportunities that are coming up. And you can do that very easily. First of all, there's a QR code on this slide that if you just click on that QR code, it will take you to a form to give us your information so you can get in our system. It takes less than 5 minutes to fill out, but it just provides us with your information, who you are, where you are, what you're trying to accomplish, so that we can look at that. You can also do that by just going to the Flower Hill Tech website and going into the MPPTA tab and clicking on the button for technical assistance. And what happens when you submit that form? That comes into us, and our team will take a look at that request to analyze it. Generally, we will get back to you to say, gosh, we need just a little bit more information on this particular area that you're looking for. Are you specifically interested in applying for MCAP, or you just need some general information? Sometimes people are just looking for a document or a link, and we just provide them with that information. But we also then take a look at what they're looking for and try and connect them with the right individual or the right organization within our network to provide the technical assistance that they need. And that may change as they go forward. Again, this is a long-term program. So if you need help from somebody at the beginning, as you get into a different stage of your program, that may evolve and will evolve with you. So with that, there's some contact information. Chris Roper is my fellow regional director. He and I are the ones that are out on the road the most and trying to be the faces for Flower Hill. So reach out to us. And then there are the email addresses, again, for the MCAP and the Indigenous Animals Grant. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and Sean Dean, I see some questions have come in, so you can help guide us through that process.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Rob, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Rob, for a good presentation today. I just wanted to highlight that we also have, sorry?
Yeah, Sean Dean, I'm thinking maybe before we get to the question and answers, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to see if she has anything she wants to add before we get into the Q&A.
Yeah, for sure, no worries.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity there, Dave and Sean Dean. Hi, Sarah Hernandez with USDA Agricultural Marketing Service. First, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining today and for this tremendous interest in this program. We know that it's been long anticipated by those of you who have been following along with USDA's initial announcement over a year ago of this $1 billion investment. Just wanted to remind you all, as David mentioned earlier on in this presentation, some of the programs that USDA has rolled out have already been completed. There are these programs, Local MCap and the Indigenous Animals Grant program, that are in the works right now. That food supply chain guaranteed loan program is also still available as an option for additional financing, as an additional financing opportunity. And additional grant programs are expected to be announced by USDA in the future months. So if you are receiving answers to your questions that don't necessarily sit well with you, or identify to you that this program is an opportunity for you, please be aware we have additional grant programs that are in the works right now. And it is certainly not a one-size-fits-all, but we were looking very closely at how we could identify some of the gaps that were left after MPIRG, the gaps that were left after the first round of the MPET program, and using ANS's regulatory authority to fill those gaps with this program and with the Indigenous Animals program. As Rob and Dave both mentioned very well, this is a competitive process. So the quality of your project is only going to be reflected in the best work that you put into your RFA response to your application, so that you can successfully compete. And I certainly encourage those of you on the call who have not connected with Dave Carter, with the Flower Hill Institute, and with the other TA providers in our network, don't hesitate to do so. Certainly their feedback is going to be of assistance to you as you are moving forward with your application. Lots of questions in the Q&A, so I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I was just going to highlight that we are also joined by two folks from the Intertribal Agriculture Council, Zane Not Afraid and Craig Harry, as well as our own Chris Roper from Flower Hill Institute. These are all folks from the TAP network, the Technical Assistance Provider network with the MPPTA program. So we're toward the end, but I think, so I'm going to call it here. For anyone who still has questions unleft answered, I'll go ahead and let you guys reach out to the TAP network for the MPPTA program. Folks who are interested in participating or going through the MPPTA process, you can find the request form for the MPPTA program on the Flower Hill Institute website, or reach out directly to the Flower Hill Institute organization at usda-tta@flowerhill.institute. We sincerely apologize for not getting to everyone's questions throughout the presentation, but we really appreciate everyone who stayed on to help provide answers, as well as everyone who stayed on to listen to those answers and get feedback on some of their questions. Anyone have any closing thoughts or closing statements?
I see, there's some additional contact information in the chat. Zane put his in there, and other information. Also, one thing I would just accentuate, somebody did put in there that the REAP program helps with solar panels. The Rural Energy for America program is an ongoing program. So again, there's a number of USDA grants that are available that people should look at, not just, above and beyond MCAP and IAG. So appreciate that. And Sean Dean, thank you for moderating this today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks. Appreciate that, Robert. Appreciate that, Dave. For everyone, today's webinar was recorded and will be archived again on the YouTube channel for Flower Hill Institute, as well as the Flower Hill Institute website. So go ahead and keep an eye for that. Please follow Flower Hill Institute on all platforms for any other updates for the MPPTA program and all future USDA grant applications. Without further ado, I appreciate everyone being here and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.